Well, how's it going, everybody? Today we are asking the question, is Jesus fully God and fully man? We're asking this question as we look at the 21st question in the new City Catechism, which is what sort of Redeemer is needed to bring us back to God? So we get to explore that topic in this lesson. I'm excited to do that with you right now. What sort of Redeemer is needed to bring us back to God? One who is fully human and one who is fully God. And we'll get into why that is important in a second, but I did want to address a question that does come up, and that is, does the Bible even teach that Jesus is fully human and fully God? I mean, that's kind of a strange, how does that even work? I don't know. But is that even in the Bible? So I want to jump in to Colossians chapter 1 really quick. This is one spot. There's many others. If we want to do a separate video on that, we can. But Colossians 1:15 and the verses that follow. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For everything was created by him, that's Jesus, in heaven and on earth, the visible and the invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and by him all things hold together. He is also the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, as I scroll, he is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have the first place in everything. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile everything to himself by making peace through the blood of the cross, whether things on earth or things in heaven. And it is this passage right here that I think is just very important. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him. Excuse me again while we scroll a little bit, but we see this come up again here in chapter 2:9. For the entire fullness of God's nature dwells bodily in Christ. So yes, the Bible teaches that Jesus is fully God, fully man. Again, we can look at other passages, but this is why we as Christians teach this doctrine. It would be a funny thing to make up, but you just read the Bible for what it is, and you realize the Bible is teaching us that the person Jesus is totally unique in all of human history. There is no one like him because he is fully God and fully man. And so, what sort of Redeemer is needed to bring us back to God? One who is fully God and fully man. The reason for this is that people have a sin problem. All of humanity is affected by sin. Every single person who has ever existed for all of human history is affected by sin. And if you want more context, you can go back and look at the last few videos we did in this series. And the last one we talked about how everyone is in debtor's prison. We all have this debt to pay, but we cannot pay it ourselves. And so let's jump into another passage that is important. This is the memory verse for this catechism question. It's Isaiah 9:6, and we'll point out a few things from this and why it's important that Jesus is fully God and fully man. For a child, this is the Christmas passage. You know, you guys might be thinking it's Christmas, but maybe it's Christmas when you're watching this, but we hear this a lot during Christmas, and something is missed in this a lot, though. Okay, so for a child is born to us, a son will be given, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor. Slow down. Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. So here we're talking about this child who's going to be born. This is Isaiah writing well before the birth of Jesus, but who is this child? He's called Mighty God. But notice this. For a child will be born, for a son will be given. Why is it that the child is born, but the son is given? It's because the Son has always existed. The Son has eternally existed within the Godhead of the Trinity, and the child is born. The Son is given, and the child is born. The Son has eternally existed. The child was born in real space-time in human history, and he walked and talked as the person of Jesus. So why is all of this important? We can look at a passage like Hebrews chapter 4, but really it comes down to we have a sin problem. The sin exists within humanity. We owe that debt to God. And because we're all stuck in this prison of debt that we owe for sin, we cannot pay it off ourselves. We can't work to pay off the debt that sin has put on us. The penalty for that debt is death. And so Jesus had to become human. He had to walk and talk as a human person. The child had to be born into humanity because the sin debt is a human issue. But if Jesus was not God, he would only have paid the sin debt for himself. He couldn't have paid it for everyone. But being God, he had the capacity, he was capable of dying and paying for the sins of all people throughout all of human existence. The entire sin debt of humanity went onto the shoulders of Jesus, who is human, but also God. He was human, so he was able to take on that debt. It was just. If God was to, say, punish an angel for the debt, the sin debt that humanity had, that would be unjust. Angels and humans are different. But Jesus is truly human. But being God, he's able to bear the sin, the penalty for sin, not just for himself, even though he's perfect, but let's just pretend for a second that he was just sort of like us, So he would only be able to pay the sin debt for himself if he could live sort of as a perfect person and pay that penalty of whatever. But he was capable of paying the sin penalty for everyone, for all of sin, for all of it, throughout all of history, every single person's sin, and we all have many, because he was God. Now, the other thing that's important is if he was not God and not the author of life, he would have died and stayed dead. But because he's God and because he is the author of life, when he died to take on the penalty for that sin, he was able to raise again. And that is the amazing part of this whole story, that we get to be like him, that we get to be freed because Jesus was our substitute, and now we get to live like he lived in a new life, in a resurrected way, free from that penalty of sin. That is amazing. So I know I kind of went that. Hopefully you stuck in there with me, because basically being human, he could take on the penalty that humanity owed, but being God, he could take it on for all of us. Read Hebrews chapter 4. Amazing. God can identify with our weakness, that he was tempted in every way, just as we are, but without sin. Now, hear me on this. When Jesus was dying on the cross, because he's God, he had the capacity to know exactly the temptation and sin that you were going through, you as an individual. But he was able to do that for every individual who has ever existed, because he's God. That is a powerful, powerful thing. So read Hebrews chapter 4. I'll probably just link the whole text in the description of this video, because it's absolutely worth reading about how Jesus, as our high priest, is able to sympathize with us. He knows the pain we go through. He knows the sin we go through, not just in a general way, specifically the pain that you go through and the sin that you go through, because that was brought before him as he paid that penalty on the cross, paid your penalty, my penalty, and freed us from that sin debt. So if you want a little bit more context, go back, look at those last few videos that we did on the law, sin, and grace. But hopefully that can be an encouragement to you that we get to live as Jesus lived, free and with the hope of the resurrection in front of us, and we get to move throughout this world with that hope and spread that hope to our neighbors and friends and our community. So I hope that you can do that this week. Thanks for hanging out, being a part of this community as always, and I will catch you in the next one. Big one.